Hey, it's Paul Venus with GreatDad.com, and I'm excited today to have an old friend, Armin Brott, with me to just chat about the fatherhood movement and how it's changed over the years. For those of you who don't know, I'd be surprised if somebody didn't give you this book when if you're a dad. This is a book that I was given me before I even remembered that I've known Armin Brott before this whole thing. But The Expectant Father was just a revolutionary book. Came out in 1995, I believe. Was it
The
about
first edition of it? Yeah.
First edition, right? And Armin's written. I don't know. You can tell me how many more books you've written since then, but has been very active in this space. I know you wrote The New Father, The Dad's Guide to the First Year. You've read books about the divorced father. You have a podcast, a radio show. You've written a billion articles. You're also working in the men's health movement. You've just done so much for men and for fathers, and before I even was a father, you're an inspiration to me and what I've done with GreatDad.com. So I just happy to have you. We haven't talked for a little while, just to talk about how things have changed and what do you when you first, let's go back to 1995 or when you had your first kids. What did the world look like to you, and why did you change from, we both have business degrees. We were meant to be both meant to be CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, and we got in this dad thing, and
that's a career killer right there.
Yeah, but like they say, like they tell moms, it's the most important career you can do in your life. So I guess it goes for us too.
No, when I first got started, I tell this story in the classes that I teach, and I think I talk about it in some of the books and I'm sure you had the same experience. There really were no resources for dads. Yeah. I still remember this very clearly. I know that they changed it, but I like the story, so I keep saying. But the Bible at the time was what to expect when you're expecting.
Right.
Yeah. And pretty much the only time that they talked about fathers in the books from the early 90s, paragraph about that big towards the end of the book, and the topic was, you may remember this, why men have affairs during their wives' pregnancy.
Oh, great. I do not remember that, but it was a lot of,
I think, okay, is that really the kind of guidance that I'm looking for here as a father who is clueless about this, and I don't know what I'm doing? How is my career going to change? Am I going to be, or can we afford this? How's is my relationship going to change? Is my dad going to keep saying, well, what about your career? Right. There was nothing. There was an occasional article in one of the women's magazines about how to get your husband to do more stuff.
Yeah, right.
Also not helpful.
Yeah.
So, I just this morning actually did a radio interview, and somebody was asking about anger and talking about men and masculinity and anger. And I was saying, anger is not a bad thing. I was angry at the lack of resources, and I was angry at the portrayal, the Mr. Dad and the Mr. Mom. Remember that movie, The Mr. Mom, right. Of the guy changing the diaper.
Love that message, yeah.
And it was just making fun of us. And I thought, that's not right. And so I set out to write the books that I wish I would have had at the time, and that they, for unknown reasons, reasons that still amuse me and I'm grateful for, that they resonated with other people as well. That we're not idiots. You can talk to us like we're real people. We're interested in learning about this stuff, and we need to know how important we are, and we need other people to know how important we are, because we contribute. Men and women, fathers, mothers, contribute different things to our children's development. They're equally important. They're just different.
Yeah.
And so many kids are being deprived of the involved dad because of various socialization things. We socialize moms to see themselves as the primary parent. We socialize dads to see themselves as the primary breadwinner. And we can talk about all that if you want, but I think we've done a miserable job of socializing everybody. And because of all of that stuff coming together, I got pissed, basically.
Well, it's great when you can turn anger into a passion for doing what you did. I mean, I totally agree with you. The male voices that we had at that time were Dr. Spock for a generation ago, Dr. Sears, but they were all doctors. And what you brought to it was a practical, non-medical training to what was going on that really ennobled men and said, you can do it. And just, I guess, just like our tagline has always been for GreatDad.com, because dads don't always think like moms. I mean, having a male voice, I mean, you and I have talked about this for years about how important it is to have other male voices and support each other in doing, being good parents, being close parents, being involved parents, all these great values.
Yeah, it's really important to have the support. But even if you don't have the support, and now it's a lot easier to get support. I mean, it's easier to get support online if you don't feel like actually communicating with other people. But it's also just to know. I mean, just to know that there are other people who are going through the same thing. Just to have a book that, and I didn't really realize it at the time. I think at the time when the first books were coming out, I had a little bit of PhD envy that I thought, well, I'm not bringing the PhD to it. But I think in some ways that's, as you mentioned, that's what clicked with some people is this is a regular guy. Yeah, he likes to talk about research and studies, because I do. I like to dig into libraries and so I want to know the data, but I also want to interview people and talk about what real dads are experiencing, what I experienced, and how that can benefit, because that's really the practical thing, and that's what I tried to bring. And I know that you have done this a lot with GreatDad.com throughout, is the idea that we can talk about the studies if you want to, but here are some things you can do right now that can make you the kind of father that you want to be and that your kids need you to be.
Yeah,
that's really what I tried to bring throughout all of the books that I've done on fatherhood, is just some practical stuff. Yeah, the research is here, and here's what studies show, and this is, science says that this will happen. However, here's 4 different things you can do right now that can help you.
Yeah,
that can help your kids, and that's what I continue to try to do.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of just basic practical stuff in there about, like you say, like changing a diaper, trying to understand your wife, trying to understand the medical things, all that too. But I think also we shared a common philosophy too about the fact that while we would love to see all dads be able to take time off and spend, full days with their kids and be the primary caregiver, it's really a gift if you're able to do it, afford it, or you have the resources. But we all also know that not all men, not all families are run the same. There's certainly different variations on the family theme, but we just keep on trying to preach this, like try to be as involved as you can, as present as you can. It's not a very long time in your life when you really start thinking about how this parenting thing, even though it looms so large in all the fiction and public mythology, but the time period that you actually have them under your full control, let's say, before birth through about age 11 or 12, it is fast, and make the most of it.
Yeah. No, and it's important, but though, and I tried to do this also, is without being judgmental about the circumstances,
right?
And especially for young guys who are at the beginning of a career, they're going to have to work more. And it's if you get yourself into a situation where spending more time at home makes you more stressed than spending the time at work, you're not going to be an effective caregiver. You're not going to be an effective parent. You're not going to enjoy fathering your child, and your kid is going to say, well, you're over there on your phone anyway. What's the point of having you?
Yeah.
So you have to find the balance, and this whole thing about balance being a seesaw, a zero-sum game, as though it's not accurate. That balance, you may find balance, but it's going to be for about 3 minutes at one particular moment, and then 4 minutes later you're out of balance and you've got to find something else. So it's a constant juggling act, the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, in my coaching, I'm finding talking to a lot of fathers is trying to help them understand that the time of fatherhood does go through all these different, it's constantly changing. So if you just kind of thoughtlessly ride the wave, you're in for a lot of troubles. But being aware of the fact that it is changing and trying to stay central to your values or the commitment you've made, all these things is really part of it. That's one part of all the things that you've written about, is the psychic journey, the spiritual journey, the bigger mission of being a father, but mixed with all the practical. So let's talk a little bit about how things have changed. I remember when we were starting out, I mean, you ahead of me, I didn't have my first child in 2000, so you got to jump on me. But we talk about the fact that we talk about our father's generation, we reacted to that about, and now we are our father's, age, but where they didn't have the same pressures. But now the modern father is expected to really step up and play, if not a 50-50 role, a lot more active a role, thankfully.
Yeah, I think that's true. The expectations have changed. We're not only supposed to be the provider protector, we're also supposed to be the coach of the softball team or the wrestling team or whatever, and we're supposed to be doing the bedtime stories. And there's a lot of pressure, but there still is this sense of that it's not quite masculine in a lot of ways. There still is that.
Yeah, like we should be doing the baseball coaching, but not the tucking in or the
right, or the taking your kids to the store. I remember I told you this. I've got 3 daughters, and 3 daughters. At some point, they were going to be teenagers, and at some point, we're going to need to go bra shopping.
Yeah,
and it's a weird experience to be in that situation, but it was a really annoying experience to be asked, well, where's the mom?
Yeah.
So wait, I'm sorry, is there something wrong with my credit card? do you want to make a sale or do you not? And I dealt with this, and almost every father I've ever met, even guys who are just going, kids just born, when they're out with their kids in the middle of the day, they still get met with, hey, you babysitting?
Yeah.
No, no, you can't do that. It's not babysitting. This is.
Well, I'd love to know that it's changed, but I had those same feelings too. I was the lone dad at the preschool, and all the moms thought I was really cute. They were really very sweet and inviting, but I was definitely the unicorn in that group.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even recently, I heard from somebody who said that her husband, this is at least a year ago now, before COVID, her husband was asked to not volunteer in the classroom because it made some of the mothers uneasy to have a father, have a man around the kids. You think that what? It's just 2019 or 2020, something like that. We still haven't gotten past that. If you want guys to be more involved, yes, we should have some social pressure to put on guys so that they are forced in a lot of ways to do that, because some guys are not going to do it. So having a little bit of a push is good. But then to have this push back on the other side, where we're saying it's not safe for men to be around children, that's the wrong message to be sending. And so, we try to, I know we're both doing this, we need to be working at this from all sides. It really is a 360-degree thing. We can educate the dads, we can educate the moms, which is a very important thing, and we can educate society generally. But it's the rest of it, so culture, socialization, the media. We're getting better. You see more dads in advertising taking on an involved role, but you also see a disproportionate number of buffoons.
Yeah, you still do. Yeah,
it's not necessary. I mean, we are extremely reluctant to make fun of women in the same way, and I think it would be nicer if women could develop a sense of humor about this. I guess because I think there's a place for humor. Not everything has to be serious, and not everybody has to be treated with respect all the time. But if you're going to make fun of dads, you can make fun of moms too, and it would be okay.
Yeah, I really think that there's a tremendous value in continuing to support with positive message, and that goes also for when we get together socially. I think there's a lot of complaining about parenting among women. There's a lot of complaining from fathers too. But there's a reason why, I was just thinking about this the other day, is there's a reason why when you get married in front of a big group of people. Originally, the idea was that community was going to support you in your marriage and would be there to keep you going, don't split up, keep the marriage going. The whole community's behind you. And I wish there was more of that in the parenting community, rather than getting together for, white wine and complaining about your spouse, your kids, your brats, and everything else. It'd be a little bit more about keep on going. It's not forever, and it's so important. I don't think you can say that to yourself enough, but it would be great if everybody, all the voices from the community were telling you the same thing.
Yeah. Although the thing about it, not forever. I mean, it is forever.
Well,
I mean, I say this having had this conversation with my mother just a couple of days ago. She fell down, and she fell down again a couple of days after that. So my sisters and I are spending a lot of time out there, and every time I go into their house, the first thing I do is I go raid the refrigerator, and then sometime within the first 20 minutes or so, my mother says, "Where is your sweater? Are you going to get a haircut? Come on."
Yeah.
I'm old enough I can't say I'm old enough to be your father, but it's like, I'm old enough to decide what socks I'm going to wear without you. But there's something there. But you were right. I mean, you said before about somewhere around 11 or 12, you really realize the difference between influence and control. And as control fades out, influence maintains it doesn't phase out quite as fast.
Right. Yeah.
You always, if you've done a good job, I think, and you've been involved and you've built a solid relationship with your kids, you still have some influence. It's just, it looks different.
Yeah. Let's do I'd love to get your opinion on that changing paradigm, because that is changing maybe a little bit behind the fatherhood thing. Is that there was a paradigm about parents and children. And one was the authoritarian, and the other one was the loyal subject, I guess. And that changed. And then I think in the last 10, 15 years, we've experienced this over-parenting, helicopter parenting. And hopefully there's a little bit of a movement now toward trying to change that dynamic so that it's not smothering parenting where you do everything, or telling the kids everything to do and not really having a relationship. It's developing a relationship with the child that is, it's evolving constantly, but it's maturing over time. It tracks from a place of structure born out of love, and then it evolves over time where that structure starts to open up a lot, but then eventually, hopefully, results in mutual respect. Are you seeing that in your conversations? That change?
Well, I am. It's interesting. I mean, there definitely was a little while ago more of the over-parenting kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing,
parent as friend, that was
right. Well, that's what I'm seeing now. Still, that parent as friend, and the parent who is reluctant to have boundaries, and the parent who is pretty much railroaded into doing everything by the child, where well, it's parent as equal in a way, or child as equal. And I think I know that I start to sound like my dad or something, but I don't think that's a good thing. I think that we can involve the kids in discussions about stuff. Absolutely. Particularly things that involve them. And I'm a big believer in get them involved, talk about it, but also get them involved in talking about what the consequences are, because they're going to be less likely to push back on consequences if they've been involved in setting them. But I think having no boundaries at all and just letting them do whatever they want to do with no consequences, I think we're raising a bunch of kids now who are unable to cope with consequences. And everybody's a victim, and there's so much focus on victimhood and on blaming other people, and the thing that I'm getting at, I talk a lot about this with adults, but also focus on the parenting thing too, is there's a lack of respect for other people's opinions. I mean, because kids, I think, are pushing back and have pushed back so successfully to their parents, there's no need to listen, and there's no need to have a discussion. People are not learning how to have a disagreement, basically, where you can say, here's what I think and here's why I think that. And what do you think? It's basically, here's what I think. Oh, you disagree? You're a jerk. You're a lousy person. You're a racist or a bigot or whatever. It's just really, I'm concerned about that. I think that we've lost. I mean, people have talked about this in the media a lot now. We've lost the ability to have civil discourse.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you can teach your kids in having respect for their decisions, but not necessarily just following their lead. Is developing that nuance of thinking. It's going to be important. I mean, as much as so many of these issues going on today, I support all these changes. We also have to be able to look at things with nuance, and that's hopefully a value we're teaching to our
I mean,
kids.
if you can't listen respectfully to somebody else, why would you imagine that everybody else is going to listen respectfully to you?
So true. Yeah.
But that's what it is this is my truth, and you can't tell me. And I said, but wait, what about somebody else's truth?
Yeah.
What, who knows who's right, but at least you might listen, you might learn something.
Yeah.
So that concerns me. I think at some point we're going to, these things, it's not, you can't even talk about a pendulum, because it sounds like that just is going back and forth between two options. I mean, it's all over the place. And I don't know if there is such a thing as equilibrium, but wherever we are, it's not okay right now. We're just out of it somewhere on some swinging thing.
So tell me about your new projects. The Expectant Dad, I know is the 25th anniversary is coming out, which blows my mind. But right, that just came out, or it's out?
It's coming out in May. Yeah, it's the new edition is. I mean, it's completely gutted and revised, and it's not just like a slap a new cover on it. It's a major undertaking to rewrite it from scratch. But yeah, so that's coming out in May, and there'll be the paperback and the hardcover and the audiobook will all be out at the same time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the fact that it's the 25th anniversary is, I don't even know what to say about that. I'm just humbled, I suppose, is a good way to start, by the whole thing, that it continues to sell after all these years, that people are still interested in it. And I hear from people all the time, I got this from my husband and he thinks it's great and it makes him a better dad. And I get, from guys, I got this from 3 different people, and it's nice. I mean, it really makes me feel that I've done something productive with my life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I know men's health is really near and dear to you as well. Is there anything else on the horizon that you want to talk about at this point, or you?
Well, I've just, I guess about a year and a half ago, started a new column called, I can't remember what it's called. I should be able to remember. Healthy Men. And then the website is healthymentoday.com. And it's, as far as I know, the only syndicated men's health column that's out there. But really the idea was that what I tried to do with fatherhood, in increasing visibility and getting people to understand the importance of fatherhood, men and everybody else, I'm trying to do the same kind of a thing for men's health, is to say, look, provider protector is great, but here's the bottom line. Men live shorter lives than women, and we die younger of every single one of or 9 out of the top 10 causes of death. 75% of suicides are men, 70% of opiate deaths are men, higher levels of stress and anxiety. It's terrible. And a lot of it, the kernel of it, is this whole thing, big boys don't cry, that we do with our sons from very young ages, that we've trained ourselves to not pay attention to what's going on with our physical self. And I mean, the tired analogies of we pay more attention to a warning light comes on the dashboard in the car rather than a warning light coming out on your body. If you have erectile difficulties, which who knew? It's an incredibly common thing. That may not just be in your head. That was the prevailing wisdom a few generations ago, that it was all a psychological thing. Well, that could be an indication of some sort of a heart problem. And just talking to doctors about this, that men, when they show up to get diagnosed with diabetes, show up 15 years later than women do. 15 years. So you think about how much opportunity is there to treat and prevent serious damage if you would have caught that 15 years before. And so I'm trying to get the word out about that, and also trying to see if I can get some inroads into the healthcare organizations, like healthcare systems or county health departments, and saying, look, it would be a lot easier for everybody and a lot cheaper if you had a way of giving men health information when they're healthy, rather than having to deal with somebody when he's had a heart attack.
Yeah.
At that point, it's going to be millions of dollars worth of expenses and lost payments and government expenses. I actually did a few years ago, did a economic paper harkening back to our days at Thunderbird, using my business degree for something, but looking at the economic burden on society of not paying attention to men's health. And I was looking at just those 5 years difference in men's and women's lifespan. If we got rid of that 5-year difference, we would save really and truly $450 billion a year in terms of, think of how much tax revenue is lost by people who have died. 5 years worth of tax revenue. And think about all the payments to widows and orphans who wouldn't be widows and orphans if those guys were alive, and quality of life and lost productivity because you're stressed out and you can't focus. I mean, these are things that we need to, as a society, but also as men and women, the same kind of 360-degree changes. And we need to be having public health messaging out there in the same way that we have public health messaging about wearing your helmet and not eating trans fats and wearing seatbelts. We need to be talking about things that you can do that can improve your health.
Yeah, sadly, I think women's mortality rates are going up towards men instead. I mean, raising in heart disease, though there is a complaint among I know a lot of women activists that there are far more studies that are done on men to provide drugs. The erectile dysfunction drugs certainly were created because there was a market among men, but just in general, there's more studies done among men. I don't know what the cause of that is, but it doesn't show up in the mortality rates. We're not driving mortality rates for men down because of more care. They're getting less care, or maybe they're getting more care after the diagnosis is the problem.
Well, I'll tell you, with heart disease, there's a really interesting thing there that's going on, and it's tragic that because of a lot of the political things about the Me Too movement and men being worried about touching women or having that, there have been some research about this that's showing that women have lower likelihood of surviving a heart attack in a public place than men do, because you're not going to have a bunch of guys gathering around trying to do chest compressions or CPR on a woman, because you don't want to be, and think, how awful is that? So there are things like that. I think as far as research, the research dollars are, I mean, there used to be, there was no question that women were excluded from research. And I think a lot of it was paternalism, is we don't want to give a bunch of weird drugs to women, we'll give them to the men. Which sounds flip, but I think it ended up hurting women because they weren't getting the treatments, and men and women respond differently to certain kinds of drugs. Women's they have smaller hearts, so that they have smaller nervous systems, and so things are different, and they present differently with heart attacks. But the research dollars are not being given disproportionately to men now the way they used to.
No, that's good. That's good news for everybody. But I think the men's health issue ties back to the fatherhood issue. It's hard to be a good father if you're sick, and it's hard to be a good father long term if you're dead. So
absolutely, yeah. And this, the thing I mentioned before about the big boys don't cry or man up, that's a parenting message. Is we have to talk about our emotions, and we have to talk about how we're feeling, and we have to tell our kids, boys or girls, if you're hurting either in here or anywhere else, you need to tell somebody about it. Yeah. You don't just suck it up. It's not good for you to do that. And that's a tremendously important role that fathers can play. And but I think we still make fun of boys who cry as a society generally, and I think that's what that does, is it basically tells little boys that the only emotion that's okay for you as a male to express is anger.
Yeah.
And we complain when they get angry, but that's the only emotion that they have, is if you cry or you talk about your feelings of love or compassion, you're looked at as wimpy. Or same thing if you're an involved dad and you kiss your kids a lot, there's something wrong with that. You're supposed to be tough. We're slowly changing, and I think that the more young dads get involved and say, you know what, I'm going to kiss my kids, and I don't really care what you think. Excellent. That's what we need. Yeah. Just, as the two of us were doing in our roles to some extent as pioneers in the fatherhood space, of just saying, you know what, we're going to be involved, and you can either make fun of me or you can join over here. And so then the next generation pushes it a little bit further, and I'm hoping that this generation of guys, particularly now that we're learning thanks to COVID, that we can work at home, and more people, even people who never thought that they could work at home, actually can, that now will maybe be a little bit easier to get through some kind of a family leave plan nationwide. Yep. Because I think it's companies were thinking, oh, how awful, we couldn't possibly let parents take time off. Well, now we know that they can maybe not take 100% time off, but they could work at home, and that can at least cut down a couple hours of their time available. So it's
moving in the right direction. Yeah. Well, it's been really great catching up with you again. The book you're most famous for is The Expectant Father, 25th anniversary edition coming out, and lots of other great books, but that one's probably the easiest to find if you go to the bookstore. And yeah. I just, you've always been a hero for me, and such a great start to the big societal change that I'd like to I hope I've played a little part in it as well. But
absolutely,
it's all good, Armin.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Paul.
GreatDad.com with Armin Brott, The Expectant Father. Thanks for listening.